Now that is satisfying. This is the Oneplus Open, and there's a chance that this could very well be the best foldable smartphone ever made. Let's find out. When it comes to foldable smartphones, I've honestly never been a huge fan of the category, though from a tech standpoint, they are pretty compelling. And while I do like the idea of a foldable, the execution that we've gotten so far really hasn't been that great. The devices that we've gotten have been riddled with compromises, going from battery life to cameras and a whole lot more. So what makes the Oneplus Open different from the rest? Now, the one thing that has surprised most people with the Oneplus Open has definitely got to be the design. And while this is a first generation foldable device from OnePlus, it's actually a third generation device from Oppo, which is OnePlus's parent company. And yes, Samsung has been doing foldable smartphones for a lot longer and has kind of worked their way through iterations of their foldable devices. But Oppo's decided to go with a different route here with a shorter and wider stance for its foldables. The design is definitely a lot more pocketable and ergonomic when folded, especially when compared to Samsung's Fold lineup. The only downside is that the internal display is a little bit smaller than what you would get on Samsung's devices. If you are using the phone for multitasking, browsing the web, or just reading a book, it honestly is pretty amazing. But the short and stubby form factor does mean that you really don't get that much more screen real estate if you are going to be watching a video, giving you something that's barely larger than what you get on the cover display on the outside of the phone, which can be a downside for some people. As mentioned before, there are always trade-offs and compromises when talking about foldable smartphones. But honestly, it's not that big of an issue, and the design choice is actually a huge advantage when you simply want to use a smartphone single-handed with the outside display. Having a more traditional aspect ratio with the 6.3-inch outer display of the Open feels more like a traditional smartphone, which I think is a good thing. It's just more comfortable to use in most situations when you really don't need the larger surface area of that internal display. I think a simple way to put this is that using the internal display on this phone is more of a choice, while the Galaxy Z Fold5 practically forces you to open the phone anytime that you want to use it, simply because of how awkward the aspect ratio of its cover display actually is. As for the fit and finish, this is by far the best designed smartphone that I think we've ever gotten from OnePlus. The attention to detail can definitely be seen from every angle of this smartphone, from the satin finish of the glass on the back to the subtle curves of the metal frame. But in all honesty, as I mentioned at the top of the video, I simply love how satisfying this phone sounds when the hinge snaps the display into place when you open it and close it. Sometimes it's the little details that make the most lasting impressions. As for the negatives for the design, the only real downside here is that the phone has an IPX4 rating. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but since Samsung's managed to give us an IPX8 with its latest foldable, OnePlus is still a little behind the competition in that regard. One area where foldable smartphones have always struggled though when compared to traditional flagship devices is the camera experience. People buy smartphones for a lot of reasons, but high-end devices have been using their cameras to set themselves apart from the competition for the last couple years. Unfortunately for foldable devices, despite their exorbitant prices, we've always been delivered subpar photography experiences. Well, at least that has been the case until the Oneplus Open showed up. If I had to choose my favorite smartphone for photography in 2023, I'd likely opt for the Oppo Find X6 Pro. While it is mostly a marketing play, Oppo claimed that the device had 3 flagship cameras on the phone, using high-end sensors for its main ultra-wide and telephoto camera, as opposed to taking the traditional route as most other smartphones do, with one good sensor for that main camera and then using much cheaper ones for the ultra-wide and zoom cameras. The Oneplus Open has pretty much stolen that playbook from Oppo, giving us a smartphone camera experience that's on par, if not better, than what we get on traditional flagship devices. This phone is definitely in the same category as the iPhone 15 Pro Max, Pixel 8 Pro, and even the Galaxy S23 Ultra. The approach here, of course, is a little bit different, but this massive camera module on the back of the phone is definitely not here just for show. When looking at samples for the photos and videos and you want to just focus on highlights and shadows, Google's Pixel 8 series definitely does a much better job. But I do have to say that the shots from this phone definitely add a lot more character than what you typically get out of most other smartphones in the category and even regular flagship devices. And thanks to the 3x periscope telephoto camera, this is definitely my favorite smartphone for street photography and for capturing portrait shots. And of course, since this is a foldable device, that also means that you can use that main camera with the cover display to frame yourself so that the photos and videos that you capture of yourself are captured with the best camera on the phone. All that to say that for once, you don't have to compromise when it comes to the camera experience on a foldable smartphone, which I think is about time. So they've nailed the design of the phone. The camera experience is absolutely phenomenal, but what about the software? OnePlus really hasn't had the best track record for the last couple of years when it comes to its software, and similar devices from its parent company have been focused on the Chinese market, which has a completely set of software needs for its users. Honestly though, this is where OnePlus surprised me the most. Rather than just copying what Samsung and Google have done, OnePlus has taken a brand new approach for its software for its first foldable smartphone. OnePlus is using Google's recommendation of having a dock at the bottom of the larger display, giving you quick access to the most recent apps, but also a shortcut to your app library to improve multitasking. There's also a recent files icon that allows you to easily drag and drop images, videos, and other files into supporting applications. Like every other foldable, you can also use two apps side by side, but OnePlus does take things to the next level when using 3 apps. Rather than splitting one side of the screen in half so that it can host 2 applications or floating a 3rd app in a window above the other applications, the OnePlus Open simply pushes the 3rd app over to the edge of the screen at the top or the bottom, allowing you to slide it up or pull it over into the main view with a simple tap. It feels just like having multiple applications open on a desktop or a laptop, but with a much more intuitive way to move in and out of the applications that you're using. And that leads us perfectly into performance of the OnePlus Open. As you can imagine, running 2 or 3 apps side by side on a device like this can be pretty intense for RAM. So OnePlus has given the Open 16 gigabytes of it, which makes multitasking one of the best features of this device. It's honestly as good or not, if not better than any other device that I've used in recent history. Even if you want to play a game like Wild Rift and then take a short social media break while you're waiting to respond, or just answer a couple emails and then jump back into the game. And if you are planning on gaming on this device, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is absolutely phenomenal. It is a little bit disappointing that the phone was announced so close to the unveiling of the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, but I don't think that anyone's going to be complaining that this phone is not powerful enough. On top of that, you also get 512 gigabytes of storage, which means you have plenty of room to install all the games that you want and then still have plenty of room left over for all the photos and videos that you capture with the incredible camera on this device. Another area that most other foldable devices typically struggle with is with battery life. The 4,805 mAh battery on the inside of this device is pretty comparable to what we get on most other smartphones of this category. That being said, you do get a dramatic performance improvement out of this, and honestly, I don't really know how OnePlus did it. Compared to the Galaxy Z Fold5, this phone lasts incredibly long. And typically at the end of the day, you still have plenty of battery life left over, 20 to 30%. I have to say, it is pretty amazing what OnePlus has done with this device, taking away the anxiety that I typically have with most other foldable smartphones, even when I'm gaming on this phone 2 to 3 hours a day. And I'm sure the fact that I'm using the cover display most of the time has a lot to do with it, but overall, it's a great improvement. Naturally, OnePlus delivers fast charging technology that allows you to charge this device from 0 to full in about 45 minutes, but OnePlus seems to have forgotten about wireless charging yet again. Yes, OnePlus, we get it. Wireless charging isn't as good as wired charging, especially when you consider your fast wireless charging, but everyone looking to buy this phone already has 2 to 3 wireless chargers at home or at their desk at work, and denying them the ability to use those devices, especially in 2023, is absolutely absurd. Okay, tangent over and back to you guys who are looking to buy the OnePlus Open. And despite these small little quirks, the OnePlus Open, honestly for me, is the best foldable smartphone that I've ever used. And that's even when you consider the $1,700 sticker price of this device, which on a good note is really only $1,500 when you consider that they take any trade-in for this smartphone. Even if you have an old flip phone from 20 years ago, they will give you $200 back when you buy the OnePlus Open. As I mentioned at the top of this review, I'm usually not a fan of foldable devices just because of the compromises that they have, and typically switch back to a traditional slab phone as soon as the review period is done. But with the OnePlus Open, I'm actually looking forward to keeping this as my daily driver for the next couple months. And I have to say, that's probably the best compliment that I can give the OnePlus Open. And that's gonna do it. If you have any questions about this device and how I've been using it for the last 60 days, feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.